Hello, everyone. Welcome and welcome back for those who've been with us for the last 4 weeks. Today, we have Kathleen is back again today. Last few weeks ago, she did a webinar on family dynamics during these disruptive times. And today she's going to focus on the 8 human qualities to help us in disruptive times, in unprecedented times, to thrive rather than just cope. We've had various people come in, talk about state of being, talk about awareness, giving us different tools to boost our immunity, giving us tools to move from an inward mindset to an outward mindset. And today we're really going to go to the core of 8 human qualities that can truly help us, that are actually in the beautiful book she wrote that we will send you a link to. And so we'll go through one by one, and I'd love you to comment and please ask questions as we go. So between the 8, we'll take a little gap for questions and comments so that we can really move through each one by one as we build to the next. So welcome back, Kathleen. Thank you very much for the generosity of your time. I know it's very early in Los Angeles, but an absolute honor and privilege once again. So please begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Feisal. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you and be part of this series. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us here today. And I really hope that this is useful to you because, look, we've all been on lockdown for quite a while now. And as Feisal said, these are unprecedented times. They're very uncertain times. So we don't know, what's going to happen. Now that some countries are lifting the restrictions or starting to do that. I know we are in Los Angeles, for example. Some of the stores are going to be open. Nobody knows how we're going to maintain or control this, but the purpose here today is to talk about 8 human qualities. And these qualities are really things that we possess innately, yet we may not realize that we do. And during a testing time, which this is, I think we learn how to use them. We find out what we're really made of. So I'd like to begin with telling you what they are, and then we'll go through each of the qualities. And by the way, these are from a chapter in my book called Life Preservers. And I wrote this book about 5 years after my son was killed. And I had been in some very strong grief. And I wrote the book as I came out of that to basically help people. And I used the metaphor of crossing the ocean and the things that we would need to get through the ocean of grief. And in some ways, they're very applicable to what's happening today. For example, many of you either have lost a loved one directly to the coronavirus or know people who have. And you may also find that you've lost a loved one, not from the coronavirus, but are grieving from that. So the first purpose of these qualities were how to get through grief, but they can also be used to build resilience and cross the ocean that we're in now. And instead of just surviving, to thrive. So that's the first thing. I called them life preservers because as you cross the ocean, you may want to, instead of drowning, you want to reach out for something and hold on to it. So the qualities are, in order, courage, hope, faith, spirituality, optimism, humor, patience, joy, and compassion. And I put them in an order for a reason. So let's begin with the first one. And I just want to check, does everybody hear me? And
Yes,
yes?
We're good.
Good.
We're good.
Okay. Because we're getting the picture. Okay, so let's begin with courage. And I put this in the first of the qualities because it's, I feel, the most important human quality. Courage is the ability to get up in the morning, could be as simple as that, and do what needs to be done. It's courage to take action when there seems to be no action to take. In other words, courage is a dynamic quality. It's on the scale of emotions. It's right in the middle in terms of it's dynamic. It gives us the ability to change. And this is very important because when we're in depression or apathy or fear, sometimes we take actions that aren't good, or we become frozen in that fear. We don't know what to do. We get stuck in that. The quality of courage is a dynamic quality. It's that part where you say, you know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, in spite of my fear, move forward and do what I feel is the right thing to get across this ocean. So it's a very active quality. And from that quality of change, we can change our perspective. We can change our fear into something more dynamic that leads us through, instead of fear making us stuck. And I'll explain a little bit about that. When we're in fear, we're in the limbic system. And the limbic system has three modalities: fight, flight, or freeze. Now, this is part of the primitive brain that we actually needed to survive. But as we advanced and evolved, we developed another brain, which is higher cognition, which has the ability to think through a situation. When we're in the limbic system, as many of us fall into when we're in fear, we fight. We may become very aggressive. We fight out of fear. We might flight, which means to fly away, to disassociate, to use substances, food, all sorts of things to avoid what's in front of us. Or we freeze. We become numb, paralyzed, unable to move forward. Courage vibrates on a different level and it says, stop. Let me think about what's going on here. I have the courage to overcome my fear. And I think one of the things in grief that's so apparent is that you don't want to get up and do the day. You become mired in the sense of loss. And right now, through this coronavirus, we have a loss of freedom. So oftentimes we will get stuck in fear. What's going to happen? How do I get out of this? Are the people in charge, do they know what they're doing? All of this thing. Plus, what's the world going to look like when we do go out? So courage, think of courage as taking action, as counteracting the fear and preparing to do battle in a healthy way, which is stepping up and doing what life asks you to do. And that's not always easy because life is not always fair, as we know, right? Life gives us challenges, and our task is to step up and do what needs to be done, but we first have to embody the courage. Okay, so the second quality is a component of courage, but it's hope. So when we mobilize and we say, okay, I'm going to do what needs to be done. I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to do the tasks in front of me. Now I'm going to hope that things improve. I'm not going to allow myself to be stuck in this depression, this apathy, these lower vibrations that hold us, that tell us, you know, nothing's going to change. What's the point? It's a form of despair and hopelessness. And this is a very dangerous place to be, because in that cycle, we become unable to make the changes. We retreat back into our fear. and we become hopeless. So hope is another dynamic quality that says, I hope things are going to get better. I'm not going to get stuck in the moment where things seem hopeless. The quality, for example, of depression is hopelessness, being stuck in the moment thinking it will never get better. If you ask a person who's depressed, or if you've ever had depression yourself, it's this idea that things won't change. They'll always stay the same. Hope is a quality that says, you know, that may be true for the moment, but this is just a feeling. It is not the reality of my life. I can hope for better things because the moment is sacred. The future is sacred. What we're feeling now is transitory, and we have a choice about how we feel. So instead of feeling despair, we can feel hope. It's this idea of better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. If we stay in the darkness, we're cursing it. We're talking about all the things we have no control over, everything like that. We curse that darkness instead of doing the small, simple act of lighting a candle. And when we light that candle, we bring the flame of life, the potential, the future, and we illuminate the darkness, and we can hold that light and bring it forward. And this is a profound but simple act. And sometimes we forget the most simple things are the human things that are going to move us forward. So the next time you feel stuck and you feel the darkness, and remember, there's a place for the darkness, but we have to come out of it. You can light a candle of hope and say to yourself, you know, this moment might look bleak, but the next moment could be better than I ever thought. Right? Any questions so far before I continue?
So what habits or what do you do on a day-to-day basis, for example, to build up to that ability to have hope, to have courage, right? To believe, because it's basically a trusting, right? You have to trust to be able to have that.
Yes, I think, well, you have to have trust, but trust is an elusive quality because I know that in grief, for example, trust is a hard thing to have because, especially if the death has been violent, because things are shattered. And say in coronavirus, we thought the world was a certain way, and one small virus has changed a lot of things. So on a daily basis, we want to focus on the qualities and do what we can. So for example, courage is to say, when you wake up in the morning, I'm going to have the courage to do what I need to do. It's sort of owning that quality and then designing for yourself small steps to do it. Have the courage to have that conversation with someone. Have the courage to make a plan, regardless of whether that plan exactly works out. Do something dynamic. But again, a lot of it has to do with how we think. So if we don't understand that we're fearful, we will not be courageous. So in other words, stop, think, feel, and then when you understand how you feel, I'm feeling fearful today, change that to, I have the courage to go on. I meditate every morning, and meditation for me, or mindfulness and prayer are one of the great things that we have to do. And during that meditation, I try to check in with myself to see how I'm feeling, see what I'm thinking, and change that. Go up the scale from thoughts of despair or depression and darkness, and go up the scale to courage and then to hope. And with hope, you could do a simple exercise. For example, write 5 things. I hope I have a better day. I hope I can be an even better parent. I hope I can discharge my business duties in an even better way. So it's cultivating a positive attitude, a hopeful attitude. So you can do those 5 things and keep them with you and refer back to them during the day. How well am I doing? How hopeful am I? Again, a lot of this has to do with changing your thought process, because some of us, or many of us, have very negative thoughts that we're not even aware of. So checking in, how hopeful am I today? How courageous am I? Does that sort of answer the?
Yes, perfect.
Good.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so the third quality is faith and spirituality. And I put them together because while many people have faith, there are other people who do not have a formal faith, but they have a spiritual practice, right? So I combine those together. When you have a tragedy in your life, or you're trying to get through something that life has given you, you have an opportunity to really understand your faith and just to make it work for you. Because if you have faith, but it's been untested, you really don't know how strong that faith is. You might think you believe things, but there is nothing like a challenge, a strong challenge to test that. People have crisis of faith. And if you allow this crisis to test your faith and make it stronger, this will be something that helps you build resilience. I know Ramadan is happening now, so it's an opportunity to look at your faith and join more fully in it. You know, we might say God has his reasons for doing these things, and we may not understand them. We actually don't have to understand them, but we have to step up and deal with whatever is given us. And all of the great faiths and spiritual practices give us ways to suffer well. In fact, that is one of the primary tenets of faith. How do we suffer? Are we worthy of our suffering? Can we transform it into something useful so that we're not dragged down by it or destroyed by it? So this is where faith can buoy us forward, and we actually believe what we say we believe, and we act on it. And this is a marvelous, marvelous quality, and particularly in terms of grief, because every religion and spiritual practice has a belief of the afterlife. And even if you don't have a faith, what do you think the afterlife is? What happens to us? So that starts to put life into perspective. And I noticed often in my work with people who explored their faith or spirituality and had something about the afterlife generally fared better in their grief process, right? So faith is a fundamental quality of humankind. It's there to help us. It's there, like hope, to illuminate the darkness. Right? It's very, very powerful. So use this opportunity while you're at home to explore your faith. What is it you actually believe? How does it help you? What life preserver is it for you? And then have the gratitude within the faith, because every faith talks about the gratitude of life, of living, of what is given, whether it's good or bad. Very fundamentally important quality. Okay, so The next one is optimism. Now, optimism is kind of like hopeful, the faith to be optimistic, but it's a particular quality that is the opposite of pessimism, right? Pessimism is, things are bad, they're going to get worse, they've always been bad, the glass is half empty, and I don't care. It's a certain quality, it's a brittle quality of life, right? There's an expectation that things will always be bad, and if you believe that we attract what we believe, well then maybe we attract negative energy. If we can change to optimism, if we can really unveil that quality and take it to heart, we then begin to think the opposite of pessimism. Well, things could actually be good. Things are good. My glass is half full, could be even fuller. After my son died, and he died he was kidnapped at college, and it was really a tragedy. He was kidnapped, and the worst things happened. I had always been an optimistic person, but I found myself being very pessimistic, because how could the world do such a thing to such a beautiful young person whose faith was so strong, whose potential was so great? And I had to realize that the world does have suffering in it, that these awful things happen. But could I retain my optimistic nature even in the face of that? And I'll tell you, it took a while. It took great thought and great care to say, you know what? No matter what happens, my glass is still half full and could get fuller. Did I suffer the loss? Definitely. Did it alter my trust in the world? Yes. But did I regain my optimism? Yes. And it's like when the ship is crossing the ocean and you're at the helm and you're seeing the darkness ahead. Can you embody optimism? Can you change the way you think? Because once again, these qualities are changing the way you think. When you feel pessimistic, when you feel yourself getting down, can you create an optimistic thought? Can you say, my ship is going to get through this ocean, and on the other side is going to be something better? And if it isn't that much better, I'll deal with it. It's a powerful, powerful quality. So then let's move on to the next one, which is humor. Humor is just a marvelous, marvelous quality, because if you can't laugh at things, they become even more grim. And a lot of things aren't that funny. And I remember, after my son Aaron died, like nothing was really that funny. And I'd always had a kind of like the Irish sense of humor. And so I thought things were generally humorous. When someone cracked a joke, I remember afterwards, and I laughed, I felt guilty about laughing. How could I laugh when such an awful thing happened? In fact, would I ever laugh again? Would anything be funny? And I think the great quality of humor is sort of rising above the sorrow, the suffering, the bleakness, the darkness, and saying, we can still laugh, because some things are funny. Some things are funny even though you might be depressed and sorrowful. By the way, this quality, as many of the qualities, are active qualities. They require something. Like laughing is an action. It's a dynamic, and your face has to change. So if you have this sort of like sorrowful face, right? What it's like a glum face. It's turned down. The act of laughing changes everything. It raises the energy and the muscle of your face. You change. Your whole spirit changes because there's something humorous. So how can we embody that? There's a wealth of comedic comedy shows that are uplifting, that will make you laugh no matter what. There's probably loads of things on YouTube, on the net, on all sorts of things. So one of the things I did during the first year is I watched comedies. I can't even remember what they were, but that helped me because I found myself laughing against my own grief. And after I would laugh, I would realize, yeah, well, maybe it's not so bad. And I think also during this time of lockdown, when we're all pretty much trapped inside, right? I mean, we can go out, but it's such a limited range of experience, right? Particularly if you live alone. Turn on the television or the web, find a funny show and start laughing. It will lift you up, it will inspire you, and you'll realize, you know what? Maybe things aren't so bad. And one of the things that occurs to me is that humor involves humanity. It involves somebody doing something funny. So this is why we are such social creatures. We're not meant to be alone. We're meant to cry together, to laugh together, to make jokes together, and do funny things. That is a sure way of taking us out of the dull routine and lift us up. And maybe from that place, we have a better perspective and we can go out today and meet the world, even if it's just for that walk that you're allowed to take or whatever it is. Here in Beverly Hills, we're allowed to walk around and so it's a very quiet neighborhood, but since the coronavirus, I've seen people I never saw before because everyone is out walking with our masks, right? Laughing or smiling behind the mask, even though things aren't that funny. So this is a marvelous human quality. Let me stop here because I'm doing a lot of talking. Any comments, Feisal, or any thoughts?
It's remarkable to see that you were able to make those choices to be able to help yourself move forward. But in that moment, right, it's many people, some have been there, some have not experienced something as tragic, but we all think, and I remember when I had an experience of such, and I went to the intuitive healer that works with us, and I said, the world has collapsed. And then she said, no, your world has collapsed. So did you, in that differentiation, do you feel that you're able to separate that this is happening to me and why not the rest of the world? Did you find that dichotomy that was a challenge?
I think so, because one of the things about grief is, unlike the coronavirus where everyone is experiencing the lockdown, in grief, you feel like you're the only one. There are other people, of course, but it's very isolating. So this is why, for example, optimism is so good, because the world is, your personal world is shattered. So therefore, there's a pessimism. Well, this is not happening to other people. I'm very sad. My world has been collapsed. How do I embody optimism when it's such a pessimistic thing? How can I laugh? How can I have courage? And what you say is very important to realize, to step back and say, I will rejoin the world, and it's a good world. That's the optimism. But right now I'm suffering. I have my own thing that's turning me into something else because of this collapsed world. So it's having the objectivity to feel your feelings and honor them and realize, yes, this is my experience at the moment. but it may not always be like that. I want to rejoin the world. And when you get to that point, that's a very optimistic thing, isn't it? Because regardless of how you've suffered, there's still a desire to rejoin the world. And I think that's fundamental to the human qualities. That's kind of what they're designed for, to help us through our suffering, but help us rejoin the world. And humor is one of the funny ways to do that, because when you start laughing again, you want to join humanity. You want to be one of the people who laughs again and is optimistic. Does that sort of answer that?
Yes. Another question on how do you train your brain to be optimistic or to be hopeful or to have courage? So there's obviously those you said who have been born into that faith, the others who have developed that knowing. But then there's another group that maybe is neither here, neither there. So is there any kind of training? I know you mentioned meditation, but I guess the question is, what can we do to train the brain, right? Obviously we talk about sympathetic nervous, parasympathetic nervous system, right? But what would you recommend?
Well, one of the things that's fundamental to this is awareness of what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And this is, we're not used to doing that. Therapy is one of the great ways to connect with that. For example, you begin to see the patterns of your thoughts. You begin to see why you make certain choices because of how you think and how you feel. The more aware we are, this is what I'm thinking. So checking in, just that daily check-in several times a day in the beginning to learn how to do it, which is, okay, what am I actually thinking? Because you will find there's a lot of thoughts going on during the day that you're not even aware of. If you stop and check in, it will surprise you. You begin to see the types of thoughts. Therefore, you can then begin to correct them. You say to yourself, yeah, is that really true? You'll be walking along going, oh, well, this is not a good thing. And that's your subtext. If you amplify that, discover what you're thinking, then you can make an intervention. Most of the negative thoughts will come from fear, and fear is in the limbic system, right? It's an automatic, the primitive part of the brain that says, you know what, there's danger, I have to react, fight, flight, or freeze. When we're in that limbic system, we're thinking along those lines and we're acting from that place. When we stop and we say, wait a minute, is that really true what I'm thinking? Is there a tiger coming through the door? Do I have to react like that? We can then engage our frontal cortex, which is higher level executive thought, and decide how we're going to think. That's where the human qualities come in. I'm thinking and acting fearfully. I'm going to change that now to courage. What's courage? The ability to do battle with my thoughts and overcome them. Have the valor to fight this battle. To have the heart of courage to determine how I'm going to act. That's coming from the higher mind and the heart. And of course, spirituality comes from even the higher part of the brain, which is, the mystics would call the communion with God. The scientists would say the place of the mind beyond space and time. So it orders itself. You're either in the limbic system, the executive frontal cortex, or the space beyond. We need a combination of the three in order to act purposely. So the answer to your question is to develop an awareness of thought first and foremost. Why am I thinking that? And then make the appropriate intervention. If I'm being negative, can I be hopeful? If I'm being down and pessimistic, can I change that to optimism? These things, by the way, they are innate qualities, but they are not easy. There is nothing like a tragedy to force you into using them and embodying them. When life is easy, people get by. But during this particular time, we need these qualities. We need to manifest them and own them, right? So in answer to your question, begin by being aware of what you're thinking and feeling. Look at the patterns, then make the interventions, right? Okay, let's move on to the next one. We have 3 more to go. Patience. This is an incredible quality. Now, and many people are patient, others are not. And believe me, when you're in the limbic system, you are not patient, because the limbic system says, act now. Disengages from the higher brain and does something, usually not that great. Patience is taking a breath and stopping and being patient, first of all, with yourself, especially in grief, and especially today with coronavirus, because we cannot move this any faster because it's beyond our control. So we need to be patient with what's happening, patient with ourselves, our irritation, because also what happens is during this lockdown and also in grief is we become impatient with ourselves and other people. When you're living in the house with the same people, they start to get on your nerves because space is so limited. So we need to take that breath, look at what's irritating us, and develop the quality, make an intervention of patience. Cognitively, you know what? I'm really annoyed. Why am I annoyed? Let me develop patience. Because honestly, there's not a whole lot that can be done until we resume our normal life, whatever that's going to look like. So patience is really a gift, and it's something that we need to develop for ourselves first, and then for others later. Let me go through the next 2 qualities, and then I see there's a couple of questions. The 7th quality is joy. Joy is also the sister of hope. You can have hope and joy. For example, I hope there will be joy. Now, in grief, one of the first things to go is joy. Because how can you be joyful when your heart has been broken, when your world has collapsed? And by the way, grief is not only death, it's a death of a relationship, it's a death of a dream, it's any demise of something important to you. And the joy looks as though it will never return. There's a dryness to it. There's a sadness. So instead of feeling joy, you feel that incredible sadness. Joy is an elusive quality. But what I found was one of the easier ways to get it is to look at nature. Nature is so hopeful. It's so beautiful. A flower holds within it the promise of joy. A bud that has opened shows us we can live again. We begin to see in the sunset colors of hopefulness. There's a joyful stirring in the soul that maybe, just maybe, things will get better. And by the way, joy is an expression and outgrowth of sorrow, because when you have been sorrowful with loss, that's when you can really understand joy. When it returns, and it will, it is so profoundly beautiful and simple. So that is a superb quality that if you focus on when you're sad, you can say to yourself, someday there will be joy. And you can also bring some flowers into the house and look at them and see in that the joy of nature. The last quality is compassion. And I put this at the end because it's not that sorrow is completely over, but as it starts to transform, we begin to feel compassion. First for ourselves and our sorrow and what we've been through, and then for humanity. Because our suffering opens our heart, it breaks our heart. And out of that, we begin to fully understand how sorrowful humanity is. That we all experience these things, great and small. And that we're in this together. We are not separate. Yes, in the beginning, in our sorrows, we feel separate. But in the quality of compassion, we realize we're all in this together. And the compassion opens like the flower. And we begin to want the best for ourselves and for everyone else. And that is, I think, the transformative quality of suffering. Whatever that suffering is, these qualities lead you to the transformation, help you through it. And again, in compassion, the last one, we're open to love. And love, by the way, is the higher octave of all of these qualities. But the qualities will help you get there, right? So, any thoughts, questions on that?
Yeah, I mean, so what's the difference between compassion and empathy? Like, is there a difference, or are they?
They are similar, right? Empathy means we can relate to another person's feelings. We empathize with them. So we say, that person is feeling sad. We try to understand why. We empathize with the situation. It has a human quality to it, but it has a little bit of intellect too. Oh, I see that person is suffering. Oh, I understand. I really feel sorry for them. Compassion, on the other hand, is a joining with, the Latin compassion, joining with the feeling. So when you see suffering, you feel it in your heart. So it's not just an act of empathizing, but they're similar. Compassion is being with the person, really able to sit with them. There isn't an intellectual function there. It's being with, and it's far more powerful than empathy. But empathy is also very good. Does that sort of?
Yeah. Then there's in terms of, you were saying, when we talk about, I mean, I've written in the book as well, the surrender is a becoming, not a giving in or a giving up. It's our ability in that moment to look for that opportunity. But it's easier said than done, right? And you spoke to many of these qualities and said that you can truly enjoy, savor joy when you've been through that experience. But why is it that we must go through that to be able to savor at that level? Like, it's.
Well, there's that old saying, no pain, no gain. Now, I wish we weren't like that, but we're stubborn. We have a heart, right? But the heart gets layered up with different things that happen in life. So we need to keep that heart open, and the human qualities help us to do that, right? So that we can reach those qualities the next time without suffering. But in every human life, every human has something that can lead them to find these things, whether it's great or small. To each person, it's pretty big, right? Okay, let's see. Are these questions? I can't, let's see on the chat.
Yeah, so any? Just, look, so the other difference, I mean, some of the questions are about how do we, obviously, in this time of negativity, how can you bring, humor? How can you bring the element of, obviously people use the word, happiness versus joyfulness. How do we cultivate that, beyond just the mental understanding of the word you're saying. You're obviously explaining it, in tangible form, but there's still, people online are still trying to grasp it.
Well, right. These are not easy things to grasp. Trust me. I mean, they're very hard. And the one question about humor, I mean, this will show you something about how my humor. So when I walk along the street and I'm thinking, oh, I have to wear this mask, I get into that negative thing. And then I see somebody who has a really funny, and I just laugh because it's comedic that we're all walking along with these masks on because of this virus. So I make a choice to think of it as humorous. I could stay in I don't like this is terrible. But I try to be aware of my thoughts. And when I find a thought that is unpleasant and negative, I make an intervention. It doesn't always work, but you have to practice this to see the humor in a situation where, like we're all stuck in the house without the things that distract us. So even, getting the hair done or for us women, I mean, we're all laughing because you can't get your beauty services. So I think that's a tragedy, but okay, that's my humor. The answer to the question is try to see something funny, even if it isn't that funny. And you will find that humor will carry you along. And this is a marvelous quality. If you start watching comedy, you're going to get funnier. So that's my prescription for that. And it's so lighthearted. When you learn to laugh, even when something isn't funny, you become lighthearted. It isn't that bad, right? Okay. So now I'm saying, how can we control the brain engaged when we're in bad situations? Well, yes, this is extremely difficult. This is a position we find ourselves in, right? That we're stuck at home. The days are pretty monotonous, right? You have to be really creative to plan things, but nonetheless, it can be extremely challenging. And I think we're starting to see a lot of mental health consequences because humans are not meant to be unsocial. So this is a huge challenge. So again, if you can, walk in your garden, start reading things that are inspirational, check your mind. And one of the things is that I believe, because we're stuck in, we do have extra time. We can use this time more creatively and say, you know what? During my normal life, I don't even think about these things. Maybe this is an opportunity. We can change this and say, this is a challenge for me to become a better person. I can use these qualities as lessons that I'm going to learn. I'm going to first identify my thoughts. I'm going to check in with myself several times a day. What am I thinking? I can write that down so I can have a record and start to see the patterns. Then I can put in or make an intervention, right? I can say, okay, you know what? I'm feeling depressed. Okay, what can I do to get out of that? I can choose a quality. Okay, which quality? Optimism or hope. Let's take hope. Okay, I'm in the dark. I'm going to physically light a candle. I'm going to quietly have mindfulness. I'm going to ask my thought, my negative thought, to give way to hope. I'm going to hope that in the next moments, I can change to something more positive. I'm going to hope that when this is over, I'm a better person. So you're putting in prescriptive changes. Don't expect this to work overnight, but you do have extra time to take up this challenge. So list the qualities pick any one of them at a given time and use that as an intervention. I'm feeling pessimistic. How can I change this to my glass is half full, right? Okay.
So Ben Franklin used to every month pick a quality and review on a daily basis how he did on that quality. He would pick one per month. Is that something that you would encourage us to do?
I love Ben Franklin. I grew up in Philadelphia, so we love Ben Franklin. He just, he was very famous there and very pragmatic man. So yes, I recommend picking. In fact, it might be better to start logically with courage, because as I said in the beginning, courage is an active quality. So if we have a scale of emotions with apathy at the very bottom, apathy is a state where you're just ready to give up. And then you have depression, you have guilt, you have those lower heavy emotions. When we get to courage, that's where we start to vibrate, because we can start making or having the courage to change. We can start moving up. So if you begin with that quality, right, that's first on your list, you start observing your thoughts to see where you're lacking courage and where you can put the courage in. Do some reading about heroes in your own culture, heroes and heroines. Who are the models that you grew up with, that you want to be like, that embodied courage? Read about courageous acts, people in history that did tremendous things. And then imagine that you, in your own way, can be courageous. Make it unique to you. So you practice that quality until you feel you've got a good handle on it, right? Remember, progress, not perfection. When you see progress, you can then go to another quality. Don't get caught up in perfect courage or perfect hope. Just get a handle on them. See where you can use them. Keep a journal, because you're going to be amazed at the things that you find, right? So that's a really good way of doing it.
You're focusing a lot on the thoughts and not hearing as much on the behaviors. So what are we looking at both? Or are we looking at more, because I know obviously it begins with the head, but because I'm hearing the word thought a lot more than the actual behavior or the outcome.
In let's say cognitive CBT behavioral therapy, for example, we look at the thoughts. The behavior is an outgrowth of the thought. And by the way, thoughts are outgrowths of feelings. But looking at the thoughts is an easy way to track it. Because if you focus on the behavior, you're not going to know why you did something. We need to know the motivation behind it. What were you thinking when you did that thing? The thought is I felt afraid and I thought that person was in it. So then we examine the thought. Why did you think that? What feelings does that stem from? Because the feelings are at the root of it, and thoughts are like plants. And there could be 1,000 thoughts in one feeling. Behavior comes after the thought. An ingrained behavior, chronic behavior, is based in a particular thought pattern. Because remember, as a child, you didn't have particular behaviors until you thought or felt things. And then you developed these behaviors as you grew up to cope with feelings and thoughts. So it isn't the other way around. You had this behavior. No, you had a thought, but you first had a feeling. So it issues from there. So that's why when I work with people, I look at the thoughts and ask the person, why are you thinking that? Where does that come from? It's an easier way, because what happens is if we just look at behavior, we can feel guilty, we can feel angry about the behavior, we're stuck in the behavior itself. But the behavior is a symptom of the thought, which is a symptom of the feeling, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's beautiful. So at what point do you go to the feeling, or how challenging is it to get to that
Right.
next level?
That's
Because
that.
you're really going to the root, right? It's when we speak about state of being, that's the foundation, the fertilizer from which things grow. Now you're saying that foundation is the feeling, and then are the thoughts, and then are the behavior. So how do
Right.
we get to that to the bottom that you talk
Yes.
to?
That's the great task, because it is easier to think about something than to feel it. The feelings are usually buried because as children we experience these things. Our cognition is not in fully developed, so we feel certain things, then we put thoughts, then we put behaviors. It's more difficult to get to the root of the feeling. That is a process in therapy that is a really worthwhile one, because once you get to the root of how you actually feel and you begin to make interventions in that, then the feelings can be used to support you. They become rich fertilizers rather than these scary things that make you think certain things and then act out. And all of us have a series of actions that we do based on things we thought, but original feelings. And the task is to become aware of that. And it's very hard work to get to the root of the feeling. But if you use these qualities to examine the way you think, that's a process most people can do. And then you can take it further into the root work of feelings. But it's easier to track a thought and work there, right? Because not everybody's in therapy, so they need tools to do a process, right?
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. We have a few more minutes. So what I'd like you to do, what would you recommend? So would you recommend they do the bend? I know you said that once you feel there's progress, move to the next one, or should they create what Ben did where with using one per month? I know that turns out to be 8 months, which is quite a long time.
That's a long time. I think what we could do is we could do a cyclic thing. So you look at the qualities, right? You start with courage, because again, that's our dynamic quality. You practice that, and maybe maybe you do all the 8 qualities for the first week. So you familiarize yourself with it, but then you start again. Let me deepen my relationship with courage. Let me deepen my relationship with hope, so that you're working on this. Or you could do 1 quality a week. That would be 8 weeks. I think the idea of doing a quality every day or every couple of days, getting a good handle, and then go back and do it, right? Because lots of things will happen during this process. Lots of things will come up for you. You'll learn so much about yourself. Then if you want to master any one of those qualities or all of them, you do the deeper work and the deeper commitment to it. So I usually tend to let people do what they want, and because that's a way of determining what's good for them. So give it some thought. How much time are you willing to spend on this? But at the very least, make yourself aware and familiar with all of the qualities of humanity and bring them into yourself, big or small. Do something with each one of them. Some of you will want to master all of them. Some will want just a survey course. But I highly recommend working with this, particularly at this time, because you're going to build resilience. And when we emerge from this, you're going to be better equipped to handle the new world. Right?
Perfect, Kathleen. Thank you very much. Just for all of us, we're going to be sending you one article or letter from Kathleen for the next 8 weeks, one by one. And there you'll be able to have much more information and sharing from Kathleen, in addition to obviously the recording. But thank you very much, Kathleen. What a beautiful experience. Sharing completely from a personal level, as well as, having us, even though these are all ideas that are easy to talk about, but to get a grasp and a handle on them is not so easy to not only, to transmit. And you did such a beautiful job. And we felt that, we felt encouraged, as you said, to have the courage to begin with, to actually say, you know what, let's look at these and let's engage and spend the time to be able to build, which is at the end, the compassion towards ourselves. And our outer is a reflection of our inner. And I think it was just, a beautiful, beautiful experience. So thank you, Kathleen, again, for the generosity of your time. Thank you for waking up so early. I know you wake up early, but it's late out here in Hong Kong, but I know it's very early for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone, for being here today again. We have next Tuesday, Dr. Shafali coming in to talk about conscious living and parenting. She's written the foreword to the book I wrote. Then we have Graham, one of our co-heads of Family Dynamics, talking about how to lead with impact while working remotely. And then on Thursday, we have Jonathan, again, one of our life coaches, who's going to talk about how to leverage talents to improve decision-making, but really about how to put your best foot first forward. So thank you very much, everyone. For those who were with us even through the Ramadan timing in Dubai, thank you for being there. Enjoy your meal. And for the rest of you, have the rest of a good day or good night. Thank you.